Okay, Trav, let's break down some lessons. Let's figure out as we start to consider getting into a partnership. Maybe you haven't done this yet and you're trying to discern what are the things that I need to know ahead of time so I avoid making certain mistakes. Eric, I'm going to let you kick us off.
Oh, Russ, I unfortunately have had a bad experience with a partner. And the story was like this. I had much like Joey was talking about before, maybe you were talking about before, I knew I had a deficiency in an area and I had an opportunity to bring on a partner that would crush that area of the business. And it was a small business. And I brought that partner on just because of the one skill set that partner had. That turned out to be a disaster for me and for the business. And I began thinking about that before I even knew we were going to do this podcast. What kind of test am I going to go through in my mind to choose my next partner before I go into business with them? And one of the things I'm going to ask myself is, regardless of skill set, regardless of their professional history, their successes, whatever they've accomplished in the past, would I trust this person with the most valuable things in my life? And those aren't even financial. So if something happened to me, would I trust this person with my wife and daughter to take care of them? That's a really, really high bar, right? And if this prospective partner can't hurdle that bar, then they're not going to do anything for me less than that. And so for me, that's the high bar they've got to reach moving forward. I'm going to ask that of every partner that I have. I won't ask them, I'll ask in my mind. I'm going to get enough information, whether I talk to people they've been in business with, coworkers, friends, prayer, whatever it takes to determine the answer to that question. If the answer is yes, I can trust them with the most valuable things in my life, then we'll do some more due diligence. Hey, do they have the skill set I'm looking for? And I think a second thing, if you'll allow me to add one more, if you're going to be working with someone, maybe something Joey should have thought about before he started working with you. Do you really like this person? Because you're going to be spending a lot of time with them. Are they enjoyable to be around? If the answer to that is no, hey, why put yourself in that situation? Because you're going to want and need to interact with them constantly. So those are two things for me.
What's the most important resource that you have? If you really thought about this deeply, I think you'd come to the same conclusion that Joey and I did. It's time. In our newest book, What's Without Wall Street, the 3 Steps to Financial Freedom Through Passive Income, we talk about how are we tracking that time? What is the thing that we can do to get more of that time back?
That's right. If you've ever been listening to our podcast and thought, man, it would be amazing if I could take all the things that you guys have learned over the last 10 years and just summarize them, put them in some way to easily digest them and take action, that's what this book is all about. You're not going to want to miss it. Go to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/new book and get your copy today.
I think what you're saying is that we always want to be in good or bad deals with good people, right? Like, because if you are in a bad deal with a bad person, it really it's not fun, right? And if you can find good people to be in deals with, it's when a deal goes bad, good people will make it right. I think that's kind of what you're saying. I think an element that helps you determine if you're going to like this person and this is going to be a quote unquote good person is look for other things in their life, right? A bad tree doesn't bear good fruit. So I would be looking, right? This is me. I would be looking at other track records they have in life. Maybe it's a spouse, right? Have they been married? And if they've been married for how long? Are they happily married, right? Spend time with them and their spouses. Like if this person is unlikable from their family, the people that they spend the most time with in their life, it's a decent chance you might not like them, right? So I think that would be an element. There's probably plenty other ones I'm not considering, but I would just think of what other ways can I find experience? What other ways can I see how have they treated other things that would be important to them so that when we get into a deal and it starts getting rough, because, let's face it, business is rough. There's times where, you're going to get on each other's nerves. There's times where the business isn't going as well. And you need to know that you're in the foxhole with somebody who's going to stick it out. It's going to represent you and the company that you have. Well, I think you got to look for experiences. You got to look for other things that they've done in life and try to say, okay, if that's the case, right, then that could be work. I know somebody said this before. It's like if you're considering a spouse, you look as the son, like if my dad was to marry my wife's mother, right, that's going to be a very similar interaction. Like, how would that interaction go? Because you're going to typically be a lot like your dad. If you're male, you're going to be typically a lot like your mom if you're female. So if you were to marry that person, I don't know if you guys have heard that strategy before, but I heard that and I was like, okay, I could think through how would that interaction go, right? Would they have a personality style that would actually mesh? I think that I'm trying to think that way in business. Like, what is the thing that I can apply that's going on in their life and to them applying it in business as well? No, Joey, this has nothing to do about
Russ,
the singular family tree straight up the line. All right, let's get over to you, Ern.
Russ, that's well said. I'll say one more thing. You've heard it in business, but success leaves clues. Success in relationships leaves clues. Success in your spiritual life leaves clues. Success financially leaves clues. And if you look for those, you can find them. So, yeah, I agree with you.
All right, Ern, share some wisdom. Tell me what we should consider prior to getting into a partnership.
Yeah, maybe one of the best things about prior partnership, prior business engagement is that you haven't messed anything up yet. And that one of the things guaranteed in business is that what happens after you start isn't going to be what you imagined beforehand, whether that's to a little degree or a big degree. That's just the reality. So how do you help shore up those gaps or shrink the margin of error? How do you start well? I think one of the things, and I would say great points, Eric, good conversation to this point, and that nobody engages in a business or in a business partnership expecting it to be a bad deal, right? You just wouldn't do it. Everybody expects it to go well. And for the most part, people get into business partnerships with people that they like, oftentimes a friend. And one of the things that can happen is a ready, leap, aim kind of approach where you say, hey, let's just get started and we'll figure it out. And unfortunately, that leads to a lot of frustration. And that frustration doesn't have to occur. And the result of that frustration is lack of efficient growth, maybe some unwanted detours, some conflict even. So before the business is started, before the operating agreement is created, I think some good conversation can be had between potential partners to not just assume based upon a friendship or any type of a relationship or the prospect of succeeding in business, is to evaluate, who are you? What do you like? What are your giftings? What are experiences that you've had that have gone great? What are your weaknesses? What are you bad at? What causes you frustration? What are the things that are going to be needed to make this business successful? And who's going to do that? Who's responsible for interviewing, for hiring? Who's going to be the one to do the firing? Who's in charge of daily operations? Who's managing the bank account? Who's communicating to the CPA? All of it could go on and on and on, but all of those little things are worth mapping out and putting some names by. That doesn't mean that you have to figure out exactly how you're going to do it, but what needs to be done and who's going to do it and what are the strengths behind those who's is really important before you start, to ensure as little frustration and as much success as possible. And that can be done before you get started.
I read somewhere early on that you cannot have two CEOs in a company. There has to be a CEO. There has to be a COO, right? You're going to have people running in their lane. And I think that that's hard. Whenever you get into a partnership, you think, oh, we're 50-50. Well, I know people that won't get into partnerships at 50-50. I think that that's a decision you have to make on the front end, is how are we going to divide up the company? because dividing up the company equal means that you're making equal decisions. Well, usually decisions aren't equal. Someone has to be the tie-breaking vote, whether you like it or not, right? We've been in a situation with the House and Congress and the White House, and we've had to have a tie-breaking vote happen a lot of times. Well, somebody has to make the tie-breaking vote. In a 50-50 relationship, you're at a stalemate. So I think you have to consider those things. Are you going to be the CEO? Are you going to be the COO? Who's going to be the one that ultimately makes the tie-breaking decision when you're in a stalemate? Those are decisions that have to be made beforehand, because you don't make those well in the heat of the battle. That's when things get messy. You got to figure out all of these things, especially the money, beforehand, because as soon as money gets involved, things do get ugly or can get ugly. Stallion, tell me, what are other things that we should consider prior to jumping into a partnership?
Well, I'm going to say I'm going to just continue to piggyback on what you guys are talking about as it relates to the different roles and responsibilities that each of you have in a partnership. Really, you have to be able to determine, not only do you have experience doing these things, but are you really uniquely gifted to do these things? Okay, so it's one thing to have the conversation like you're talking about, Ernie, like, hey, who's going to do the hiring? Who's going to do the firing? Who's going to make this decision? Whatever. But I think you need something, even before you get to that point, that you see that you're complementary, right? That you have the gifting and the capability in order to accomplish whatever those tasks are. And there's tons of different ways that you can find that out. There's lots of different tests and things that you can take. The best one that I've found that we use every day in our business is Culture Index. And Culture Index gives you an indication on, is this person more autonomous or less autonomous? Do they want to be on the team? Do they want to be out front? Does this person really get driven by social interaction and wanting to have people around them at all times? Or are they more kind of driven to be kind of more on their own? And are they quick in their terms of their pace? Are they slower in terms of their pace? And how much do they really want to follow a set guideline or rule, or are they more kind of visionary, wanting to kind of do their own thing? This one tool can give you an objective way to look at each of your gifts, each of your capabilities, and to ensure that you're not like up front. It's great. You could say, oh yeah, I'll handle X, Y, or Z, but maybe that's like not something they should be doing long-term. And it's okay for a Band-Aid, but just knowing that going in, I think, is critical to a long-term kind of partnership. Now, the funny thing is if you know anything about Russ and I, we're very similar in a lot of ways if you look at our Culture Index. But what that did tell us is that we had to solve for the operational component, the administrative component, very early on. It wasn't something that could wait, because neither one of us are really gifted or coordinated or capable in those areas. And so if you see the growth of our company over time, we actually continuously have to have more support in that area. But, you know, we kind of knew that to begin with. So I don't know, just adding to it, use tools to help you be more objective on the front end.
Yeah, lots of different tools, lots of different books. I mean, I think we've mentioned the E-Myth on the show before. The book, The Rocket Fuel, is a great one that kind of helps you differentiate between the visionary and the integrator. Culture Index, love that one. I read the book Second in Command for those who are more operationally inclined or realize you need an operator in there. And I'm sure we'll come up with some other ones. Let's jump over, Eric. I want to come to you. Let's talk about what are some best practices. Once you're already in a partnership, what are some things that you can do to upgrade, improve that current partnership?
So I'll talk about my current partnership with my business partner. He and I are running 3 separate and distinct businesses together right now. And he reached that previous hurdle that I talked about as somebody that I trust with everything in my life. But still, Russ, we have the legal documentation behind us that covers us for the 5 Ds that people have probably heard about before of a partnership. That's If your partner becomes disinterested, if they were to get divorced, you don't want to probably be in business with the angry ex-spouse. If a drug addiction should occur, and you may say, there's no way this guy that I trust that meets that high hurdle is ever going to face either one of those three things. Well, okay, how about the last two? Disability or death? They could be the best person in the world, but those two things could still happen to my partner or myself. And so what you want to have is documentation that spells out what happens in case any one of those things were to occur to either partner in the business. It protects everybody involved. It makes sure families and beneficiaries are taken care of like both partners want them to. I think it's a very, very powerful tool. I'll name one more if you don't mind. My partner and I, this may not be feasible for everyone, but we realized that life became a lot easier when we started sharing professional services, as in our accountant. Once we combined accountants and we both shared the same accountants for the business and us as individuals, and we could all make decisions about tax-related topics together, was a super streamlined way for us to manage our business.
There was nothing worse than walking into class when you're in school and the teacher saying, "Pop quiz day." Why? Because you were unprepared. Are you unprepared, though, for financial freedom?
Don't be. Find out how close you are by taking our 30-second quiz at wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/quiz.
I think the mistake a lot of small businesses make is they don't have communication lines that go across all lines of business. And, like you just mentioned, accounting is one of those, right? Like when you can have just a discommunication happening on what's happening with your business all the way down to your personal finances, and that can create issues, that can create pain points. But if you can use centralized people there, then now you can accomplish things a lot faster. One of the things I would add here as an improvement or an upgrade is that we have found in our businesses that a lot of times we can have extra partners come in after the fact. Like maybe not the businesses that we started with, but bringing on partners later. Because I think that there is a level we all get to based upon our own comfort zone, as well as the things that we already understand. And when we don't know what we don't know, we're going to get stuck in this echo chamber. And one of our partners said this to us one time. I remember he's like, businesses will oftentimes do these fun offsites, and they will like get away. They'll go to some fun destination and they'll plan for the business as a company, but they don't bring anybody else, any outside voice. And all they do is just reshuffle the same crap that they've been working on, because there's no fresh ideas. There's nothing new. It's just, you're just doing it in a nicer place. And I think that that's what sometimes can happen to partnerships, is you can just keep reshuffling the same ideas around. And I think that there is a lot of value into being, students of the game, listening to podcasts, being a part of masterminds. But what we have found is that we invite and look for other opportunities to bring partners into businesses who have different skill sets. I was mentioning the book Second in Command, and in that book, Cameron Harold's talking about how he had helped, his CEO take 1-800-GOT-JUNK to a really big valuation. But he was not the person that was going to take it to the next level. So they brought in another partner who quadrupled the size of the business. And I think that there is a value for us in our current partnerships is to look at some level. Maybe we need to level up in our partnerships. Doesn't mean we need to get rid of a partner necessarily, but maybe we should consider bringing one in. I was having a conversation the other day with a guy in our mastermind, and he's running a very successful business, and he's doing, $10 to $15 million a year in revenue. And I've said, hey, have you ever considered bringing in an operating partner? Someone who is doing your business at a level maybe 5 or 10x in which you're doing it, and allowing them and their systems to take ownership of that function and going from the $10 or $15 million a year in revenue to a $50 to $80 million a year revenue type number, because there are people in your space that are doing that. And what do you give up? Do you give up a percentage of the business? Yes. But would you rather have 100% ownership in a business that's doing 10 or 15 million, or would you rather have 75% in a company that's doing 50 or 80 million? And I think that those are little things that maybe we should consider as we start looking at how to upgrade or improve our current partnership. Ernie, what would be something that you would add to this?
I'll speak from experience and also from the perspective of passive income rather than active income is that we have to keep in mind the difference between passive income and absent income. And that for me, have a couple different businesses where I am a very passive partner. Unfortunately, in those at times, I have been the absent partner. And I'll tell you, if you start well and then you stop, it is hard to get back on the horse in terms of relationship and where the business is and achieving goals. So how do you improve your partnership? And I think you got to treat it like a business. You actually got to treat the thing that you're doing like it is and treat your partner like a business partner. And so that means having those things that you started, a clear goal. What is the ideal outcome? What are we trying to accomplish? Keeping that in view, keeping the operation of the business available to be reported on and actually reporting on that. And therefore, Russ, you mentioned the idea of organizations having offsites and some of the issues there. Well, that's making the assumption that those meetings are happening. So is there a meeting happening where you are discussing with your partner what's happening, how you're achieving your targets if you're online? What are the things that might be broken and how are we fixing them? Is there a cadence for that to be happening? And then second, do that. Have the meeting. Have it regularly, like you said that you would. And again, I've been guilty of not doing that, being the absent partner, and learn from my experience that you don't have to lose momentum. You don't have to lose relationship with your partner if you set the cadence and met the cadence.
Very, very good. Stallion?
Yeah, I won't beat a dead horse on this subject, but I think one of the critical things that I've seen that have taken partnerships in business to the next level is hiring to wherever your gaps are. As you're growing, you start to see, well, what got us here isn't going to get us to the next level, right? We have to do something different. And that starts to require you to find talent in places that you can't do yourself. We referred to the E-myth earlier. I think if you view your business as a constantly, it's a huge business just waiting to kind of unearth itself, then you have to hire yourself for each one of those roles and then replace yourself. And I think as you grow, you start to see those gaps bigger and bigger because somebody with a little bit of skill in something, but they're distracted by 5 or 6 roles that they're trying to fill, can never outwork the person that has one singular task and focus, even if they're not even at the same level as the first person. And so I think the funny thing is sometimes you get in that role and you're like, man, I don't really want to hire for that because I can do it. You know, it's like, I don't want to pay the money for this new role because I can do it. But as soon as you take that leap of faith and you do put somebody who has that singular focus into that gap, it's amazing the relief, one, that you get, and the two, the lift that the business gets by having that kind of singular laser focus. So I just say, don't be afraid to hire to the gaps.
All right, let's leave everyone out with a few lessons, right? We've experienced lessons. We've seen those happen in our clients. We've been coaching people now for 15 years, some of us in this space. A lot of insight comes from just being around those specific scenarios. So Eric, I'm going to let you go first here. Can you share a lesson that you've learned or observed that would help me as I'm trying to determine how to interact with partners well?
So the Bible refers to, it warns us against being unequally yoked. A lot of people refer that to marriage. And what that's referring to is if you think of two oxen under the burden of a yoke, if one of them is super strong and capable and the other one is way less capable, you're just not going to get very far. You're only going to get as far basically as the big one can take you while he's dragging the other one. So in a business partnership, think about being equally yoked. You're going to have equal responsibilities. So you could think about that in the form of capital. I have a growing Amazon business right now, growing faster than I ever imagined. And we are having to fund that owner infusion to keep inventory in place because it's growing like a hockey stick, and I'm thankful for that. But there could have been a problem created if, for example, my partner had plenty of funds to put into the business and he was unequally yoked with me and I couldn't do that. That could create friction. So I like the thought of just being equally yoked, whether that's going to be you're equally responsible for the capital, or maybe, one is responsible for capital, one's going to do all the operating, but you spell out what that equalness looks like and how each are going to contribute.
How about for you, Ern? Give me a lesson that could help me win.
I just learned a lesson, which is don't be unequally yoked, but if you are, be the weaker ox. That's what it is. Better be the small guy. One of the things that I have is some long-term rentals. I've got 4 doors and I have property managers as partners in that. And one of the properties that I bought is in Chattanooga, and almost immediately after buying this property, I got an email that said that the septic tank had been, the dirt around it had been eroded and we need to bring in a bunch of fill dirt and get that done. Here's your quote. Let us know if you want to get this done. And I had just signed an agreement. This property, by the way, was with a turnkey company. And so they had just finished renovating this property before I took over ownership. And they had a guarantee on their work that if any repair was needed on that property within, I think it was like 90 days, that they would take care of it. And here I had this bill this quote for me to pay to get this fill dirt brought in. And because I had not rushed into the agreement and read it before I signed it, I knew that repair guarantee was there. And so I asked them to go ahead and do that and to be sure that they went ahead and paid for that. And that turned out to be, it wasn't, by the way, it's not a ton of money to get some fill dirt brought in. But what that did is that set a good cadence for me, so that shortly after that, when I got another email that told me that we needed to do a $10,000 foundation repair, that my guard was up a little bit to say, well, let me investigate this a little bit further, because just because it comes through by email doesn't mean it's necessarily true. And so I asked for a couple additional quotes, and turns out that repair had already been done by the previous owner and did not, in fact, need to be done, at least at this time. And over the years, as repairs have popped up, I've applied that same thinking, that ultimately I need to be engaged in doing my role as a partner of managing the manager. That's my role in the deal here. And I've learned how to a little bit on the front end, and that has carried on to me to continue to be aware of that. And I can only imagine, if I had not caught that, how many more unneeded or overpaid expenses I would have with those properties if I had not learned that lesson. So the saying is, do not expect what you do not inspect. I find that to be true. And therefore, how I solve that is by managing the manager. So being present. That's just one experience that I've had, and I'm so grateful that I did it that way, because it has saved me a ton of money.
I got to observe a lot of different partnerships early on when I was in the investment advisory business. I was working mostly in the professional and medical world. And man, I saw a lot of those partnerships, people coming out of medical and dental schools that were going into partnerships with one another. They'd become friends in school. Neither one of them had any business experience, and it was easy for them to want to partner up with someone coming out of school. I think it was that safety blanket. And about 3 years out, it seemed to be the 3 to 5 years was that kind of a timeline where those partnerships started to unravel. And one of the lessons I learned, this is something really, really important, that if you don't have this in a partnership agreement right now, I'm going to encourage you to consider it. And it was the Texas Hold'em agreement. Sal, you never heard of the Texas Hold'em agreement in an operating partnership?
You know, I don't gamble. Be honest with you, I don't.
Yeah. Well, see, I wouldn't gamble either and not have this inside of an operating agreement.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, man. Here's the idea. And I got to watch this at firsthand. What happens is you get a partnership together, and as they start to want to break up, somebody's going to say, okay, what are we going to do with this business? It's not like it's not like an Alabama divorce where you got half the trailer going down one side of the interstate and the other half going the opposite way. We're not going to divide and conquer that way, right? You're not going to just divide the business. Somebody's going to stay with the business. Someone's going to start a new one. All right. That's just what's going to happen. So how do you determine the price, right? Because both of you have been building it. How do you know what the value is? The person selling it definitely wants to get the most for it. The person buying it wants to pay the least amount, right? That's our Walmart shopper brain. And I learned this Texas Hold'em idea is where in that operating agreement, when you come down to buying the business, I can make an offer. So let's just pretend Joey and I are in a position where we're deciding to split ways, and I'm ready to go to Joey, and let's just say our business is worth $20 million. I believe it's worth $20 million. And we're 50-50 partners. So I go to Joey and I say, Joey, here's the deal. I want to go ahead and take over this business. I'm going to give you $10 million for your side. I make him an offer for $10 million. Well, the Texas Hold'em agreement says that Joey can do one of two things. He can accept my $10 million, or he can counter me at $10,000,001. And when he counters, I have to accept it. That was a game changer when I learned that. So what it did for that partnership on the very beginning, it said, if we get to a point where we're going to decide that we're going to split up, whoever comes to make that first offer, you better make a good offer, because the other person has the ultimate ability to either accept or counter offer with $1 more. So if I wanted to lowball Joey and I was like, you know what, I want Joey out of here, but I don't want to give him $10 million. I'm going to offer him $8 million. And Joey says, you know what, Russ, I'll take that. I don't want to do that, but I'll pay you $8,000,001. I'm based upon the operating agreement. Had I signed it ahead of time, I would be required to accept his $8 million and $8,000,001 offer. And I just thought that was such a fantastic idea. It allowed the business in the future to be sold for what they would consider the fair market value, because if both of them would have to agree at that price. And I thought, like, it forced them ahead of time to think through, if I'm going to get to a position in the future where this partnership is not going to go forward, I already know how this is going to be divided up. So there's my lesson for you. Stallion, you got any parting shots for us?
I'll be honest with you, Russ. Sometimes I wish you'd just be straightforward. You know, like, why invite me onto a podcast in front of everybody? If you have something really important you want to say, let's just say it. I mean, let's just do it like men. Okay. No, but I will say the last little lesson that I feel like we learned the right way, and is, you know, this sounds kind of out of line, but it's before you ever get started, is find a way to date your partner. Okay. What I mean by that, what can you engage with them as a trial run? And before there's ever any sort of finality, some sort of, long-term kind of engagement, what is a short-term project that you can work on? Is there a way you can work side by side without there being a fully kind of transparent partnership put in place? And the reason is because there's a lot of people that have great intentions. We've all said it. Every partnership's going to be a win. Otherwise, you never would have done it, right? But when you can get the chance to see that partner in action, doing the thing that they say that they want to do, there's so much that can be revealed in that. And it either confirms or it tells you to run the other way. And again, I can't necessarily apply this to everybody because everybody's business and opportunity is different. But man, where possible, do your best to figure out a way to do a trial run, because it will serve you big time if you can do that.
Gentlemen, this has been great. I hope that as you've been listening to this, it's giving you an idea or two of how to apply, leveling up in partnerships, whether or not maybe you decide, hey, I'm going to go at this solo. I don't want to be in a partnership. Either way, this is just wins that we have, and we can learn from others. And we're going to continue to bring you more ideas, because the goal for us is to help you become financially free. And that's when your passive income exceeds your monthly expenses. We've had business partners on here before that have shared that the best way to grow wealth is to become a business owner, to own an operating company, whether that's an operating company doing investments or truly out there providing products and services to others. So I hope that you will come back and listen to the next episode. Have an amazing day.
This has been the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show to break free of the Wall Street mindset and begin building wealth on your own terms in places you understand, so that your wealth will never run dry. See you next episode.